Hello, and thank you for listening to RoadSigns, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. I'm your host, Seth Clevenger. In today's episode, we're going to examine the potential for artificial intelligence in the trucking industry. AI is very much at the peak of the hype cycle right now, but there's a very good reason for that. Technology developers are exploring numerous ways to apply AI in our industry to improve business decisions and raise the bar for safety and efficiency. But how can these AI capabilities empower data-driven fleet management? We'll set out to answer that question in this episode. But before we dive into this topic, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to Transport Topics to receive full access to our technology coverage, top 100 lists, and other news for trucking industry leaders. To subscribe, visit ttn.ws/ttsubscribe or text TTSubscribe to 571-622-0001. And now, to continue the conversation about AI and trucking, we're going to play a recent interview I recorded for TT's magazine event series featuring Corey Cox, Senior Vice President of Innovation at Tandet Group, a bulk and dedicated carrier based in Oakville, Ontario. Let's take a listen. For this next session, I'm very excited to bring in Corey Cox, Senior Vice President of Innovation at Tandet Group, a bulk and dedicated carrier headquartered in Oakville, Ontario. Thanks for joining us, Corey.
Thanks for having me, Seth. Great to be here.
So in today's program, we've been discussing how artificial intelligence can help improve safety, efficiency, and business intelligence in the trucking industry. Your company is an early adopter of AI capabilities, so I think you're the perfect voice to add to this conversation. So just to get us started here, I know this is early days, right? In terms of implementation and exploring what's possible with AI. But just give us an overview of how you're thinking about implementing AI at Tandet Group.
Sure, yeah, and it's well said. It is early days. I think it's AI is maturing, but it's early days on the implementation side for companies that are starting to figure out where that value is. For us, the challenge is almost trying to figure out where to start. The opportunities, I think, are significant. Our approach, I think, when we're looking at how does this fit, where do we go, what's next, is really how can this, whatever the initiative is, help us make better decisions. If we can't understand how we're going to use it, then we can't maximize its benefit. It's probably not the right choice, no matter how attractive the pitch might be about that. I think also it has to be data driven, which sounds kind of silly because AI obviously is about data analysis. But by that, what I mean is having the right data, having lots of sensors, which is really helping us actually drive the use case for AI. Data purity, which ironically AI can also help with, when it comes to eliminating the noise or the outliers more effectively than having pristine data, which I think has always been a goal and a good goal, but to some degree to get perfect data is also not probably possible, even the best case scenarios, other than sensors that we can pick up off independently from, what we as humans provide as input, but, and we need to be able to measure the benefit, which is not always easy to do depending on the initiative. But ironically, again, AI can help in assisting with that analysis. In understanding the benefit. So, and right now, honestly, our primary focus is on driver and fleet safety and performance.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And as you described, there's significant opportunity, and those opportunities really are virtually endless. I mean, the ways that you can potentially use AI to harness data better, right? Companies like Tandet and other trucking and logistics operators are collecting more and more data, and the question now is how to really use it effectively. And I think AI, of course, is a big part of answering that question moving forward. And you mentioned driver safety, right? I mean, that's really one of the more interesting use cases, I think, for AI in the trucking industry. It can help companies gain deeper insights into how their drivers are performing out on the road. And then as you start to get that information, you can understand how to proactively address unsafe driver behavior, unsafe activities, and also provide targeted coaching to the drivers who really need it the most. From your perspective, Corey, how can fleets use AI to truly improve driver performance out on the road and also just boost their overall safety program?
Yeah. Well, this is honestly for us, we believe, an area of significant opportunity. Now, we're very safety conscious. I think that's good, especially for the industry that we're in. Safety is really the number one thing that we is on the forefront of our minds on a daily basis. But, one of the things that drives our ability to use that is the amount of data collection, for example, that we're doing in the cab. And, you know, it's significant. And when I say significant, in the cab alone, I think we're collecting around like 100 data points every second off of our telemetry from that from the cab. Everything that the driver's experiencing on the road, from the OEM data bus, that everyone has access to,
Yep.
combined with other sensors that are measuring, sway, tilt, torque, inertial change, temperature, etc. Um, you know, it, we put this effort, so there's a post facto analysis that we can see on our dashboards, that we can see in our BI reports, but there's also the real time feedback, and that's the real power, the ability to feed back to the driver in real time a summary and analysis of their driving performance, which is
Mm.
looked at from both a safety and a better performance perspective from fuel utilization and things like that, but and wear and tear. But this data is fed back, combined, understood by very intense analytical algorithms, and then feed that back in very simple terms to the driver, where essentially red, yellow, green, almost a gamification, if you will. We're not presenting tons of metrics to them. What we're presenting to them is an analysis that says, kind of, here's where you're at. Turn off your cruise
Mm.
control because you're in heavy, high, low, a lot of hilly terrain or heavy winds. Understanding that you're facing a headwind, and to stop giving the advice to always use top gear when you're cruising on the highway, to understanding sway and tilt, as I said before, and how this is affecting our understanding of how you're feeling and how you're turning and how you're taking off ramps in the cab. The idea is we're not trying to catch you doing something wrong. That's definitely not the goal. The idea is to let you know now so that you can, self-correct as you go. And that's the power of this kind of advanced analytics, is the ability to understand what you're doing, which we don't all do. I mean, if anyone has gone to work and not realized, geez, I don't remember that green light my last turn to work, we get into a zone, and it's great to have something telling you, hey, you should be aware that you need to modify your behavior in this way. And it has had and continues to have a significant impact on that driving experience.
Yeah, just great information to support drivers and fleet managers, right? As they're looking at how well drivers are performing, and another area, another industry issue that I think AI can help to address as well is driver retention.
Mm.
So you think about an AI program that can identify trends or patterns in the data that suggest that a certain driver is likely to leave the company soon. You have actionable information as a fleet manager. You can reach out to that driver proactively. Maybe there's an underlying issue that is causing problems that you are only aware of because of the data that maybe a human would never be able to sift through on their own. But because an AI algorithm has flagged this, you now know what to look at, and you can start to address it. But I know, again, early days, but
Mm.
Corey, what's your thought on this? To what extent can fleets improve their driver retention efforts with these types of AI capabilities?
Yeah. This is a very nuanced area of AI for us, and I think it has some very interesting potential. We talk about sentiment analysis, which is something that we're playing with. Whether it's through messaging back and forth with dispatch, but I think it's also about, again, back to the number of sensors and ways to understand your driving behavior right now, and it's funny, it's not always about, well, when we start applying it in this context, we can learn more than just, are you safe? Are you efficient? We can learn that there's change. For me, maybe the most significant thing about AI and ML is its ability to detect a pattern. You mentioned that maybe there is difficult for us to do. I think it's difficult for us to do en masse. You
Yeah.
know, with as we increase the number of persons that you're responsible for on the road, and as companies grow, you know, that domain knowledge gets split out and split out. And I don't necessarily have a one-on-one, I see you for an hour every day kind of relationship with you. It becomes a little more remote and less time, but still, you know, very valuable exchanges between these two parties. But it may be less possible for me to understand the nuances of any behavioral changes. And when I say that, I mean, you know, anything we do is kind of reflected in the real world. So whether you're suddenly driving slower, faster, you're you're doing less miles in a day, more in a day, whether you're turning down loads more frequently, whether you're the selection of your loads, that pattern has changed. Things that would be very difficult for me to connect perhaps to you every day over time and understand that there's a pattern change. And it's all about the change. It's not necessarily knowing that it should be this way or it shouldn't be this way. Everyone is unique, but it's that your pattern has changed. And then having AI tell me or help me understand, is this indicative of you know, are you changing? And if you're changing, is that due to the fact that maybe you're not as happy here as we once thought? And can we get on that now and help understand what those challenges are? You know, manifest everything we do manifests in the real world, and I think that is where AI can help observe and reflect that back to us.
Yeah, I think it's another, again, fascinating, use case down the line. But apart from, obviously driver safety, driver retention, what are some other use cases for AI that we haven't discussed yet that you see as a real opportunity to resolve some industry problems and challenges?
Wow. Okay, there's definitely lots of potential here.
Where to
I mean,
begin?
some of the things that come to mind is what I call usable or truly actionable predictive maintenance, for example. Now, I've been, you know, hearing and being engaged in predictive maintenance for a lot of years now, and it's not a new term and it's not a new idea, but I think it has struggled with finding a real place, an actionable place where it makes sense and I can actually make material decisions that I think will improve our fleet maintenance overall. So, you know, an example might be the collection of DTC codes that are coming off of the OEM bus, or just sensors that are still within range but out of optimal range. That these are values that we can read off that data bus, and then you couple that with in-cab data. That, you know, can help you understand the terrain and regional variables and the patterns associated to them, and then correlate them to unplanned repair. So introducing your repair histories to the mix as well, and saying, you know, the AI, and I know there's been some you know, some progress in this, and saying, hey, we tend to see this kind of data mechanically coming off that vehicle that may not result in bulbs coming on in the dashboard or immediate breakdowns. But when we see this and we see it in this environmental context, we tend to see an unplanned repair within, you know, 15 days, 30 days, whatever it might be. I think that has some real potential. It's just saying, hey, we see these indicators, not based on your historical analysis. We know for sure you're going to go through this part on this time. I don't think that's nearly as useful as that scenario. And, you know, and then I think the next really big part is about actionable AI, as we like to call it, actionable AI for the logistics of freight movement itself. So, you know, for any to any routing, such as, you know, what we do, this is a significant project, I think, that has a significant scope and potential, is this better analysis of any to any, you know, route planning.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's probably the challenge that has always existed and is probably impossible to solve completely. What is the most efficient way to optimize your routes and your driver available hours and all these variables to make the most efficient freight network possible. And to your point about maintenance, yeah, I mean, it's clearly there's opportunities to make that more and more predictive, right, and less reactive. And making that predictive makes all the difference in the world if that stops you from, if it helps you avoid a breakdown that's, of course, so costly and time consuming, and also a huge headache for drivers as well. Anytime the industry can elevate maintenance and vehicle uptime, that is such a huge opportunity. And really, across all these different use cases we've been talking about, I think a big part of what we're really describing here is better business intelligence. Like you think about the transportation industry traditionally, a lot of decisions are made based on rules of thumb, tribal knowledge on your staff. But AI really makes it easier to operate in a more data driven, data centric way. So, Corey, from your vantage point, just how can insights generated by AI really improve that business decision making process in the trucking industry from
Yeah.
your perspective?
I've always said, and people probably heard me say this before, and go, oh, he's saying it again, but anecdotal evidence is not evidence. That's one of the things I learned very early on in my life is that sometimes our gut is wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's right, but sometimes it's wrong, and we can really be locked into believing something is this way when it's actually that. And tribal or domain knowledge, it's still valuable. It's not going to go away. AI is not going to replace us, not that fast at least. It
Yeah.
still has a role to play, but where its value is going to shift. And one of the reasons is, in the 21st century, the variables, they're just changing so rapidly. We have so many more data inputs now. I mean, we look at sources like next gen telematics or GIS or weather or freight patterns that include, seasonal awareness, sentiment analysis. All of these inputs is simply not possible for us as humans to rationalize and analyze and find productive, effective use out of all of that data. It is only possible really through the use of AI to understand that many patterns. And in fact, that's the value of AI in finding those nuanced patterns across a broad section of sometimes what we would see as completely uncorrelated types of data. And even taking the traditional data that we've been collecting, in our TMSs and other sources over the years, that's going to pay new dividends as we reintroduce this data to the models that are also consuming this other data that I've talked about, and providing entirely new ways for us to understand what's going on in the business.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting, and it's fun to begin to envision where this might take us in 5 or 10 years. And one point I wanted to dig into a little bit deeper is that the insights and predictions that can be generated by AI can make it possible to manage a business more proactively. Rather than simply reacting when things are going wrong, you can start to get ahead of things. Uh, so again, from your experience, how much more predictive do you think fleet management can become through the use of AI over time?
Well, I suppose the sky's the limit as we really are starting to find material use cases for this. But, if I were to, throw out a couple of things, I mean, we touched on, how it might be used very effectively on kind of predicting unplanned maintenance events, which, you mentioned it's not just a cost to the company or, the efficiency of the logistics grid, but it's also about driver enjoyment. No one wants to be broken down.
It's a
No
bad
one,
day.
the
Yeah.
drivers want to drive. I mean, that's what they love to do, and that's what you want to try and enable as much as possible. But I think, another future use, or something that's emerging, is again the use on the logistics side, the ability to use predictive algorithms, for example, to assist load planners in understanding the impact of their decisions, positive and negative, on their decisions as they're making them. For example, to be able to tell them, this is sure, we can do this. Perhaps I'm suggesting this is a particular decision for this order to be completed given your current workload. You want to do this because you think that's a better idea, not preventing that from occurring, but enabling the user to get the feedback from AI to say, but here's the impact of that decision. It will reduce your operating ratio by this. It will possibly infringe upon delivery times for these 3 orders over here that will be happening 2 days from now. And giving them the ability to see the impact of their decisions in real time in ways that, again, as good as we can be in that role, it's still the amount of data. I would never challenge a mapping algorithm again to get me somewhere fast based on my versus my tribal knowledge on streets in my area, for example. It will beat me, and it will beat me frequently, and more than enough for me to never guess again, even if I happen to be right or think I'm right every now and then. So I think the ability to make those decisions more, to make the understand the impact, because it can see things that are a little beyond the scope of the number of things that I can manage simultaneously at one time. I call this actionable AI. I've used the term before, but I think it has huge impact there.
For sure. And I think we've probably all done the trial and error and learned to trust our GPS routing. We think we're smarter or have a better idea, so often proven wrong, and for reasons we didn't understand at the time until it's too late. Oh, there's construction or something else that's slowing things down. But another dimension of AI-enabled business intelligence here is the opportunity not just to understand what is happening, but increasingly why is it happening. So if there's an uptick in critical events, for example, maybe you can start to dig into that and really figure out what's driving it. What do you think about the opportunity to really, for fleet managers, to really unlock that type of business intelligence through AI, where you're really kind of understanding not just what, but why?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. I actually see this as a bit of a two-pronged question. This is a critical factor to me and to us in AI-driven business intelligence in general. I don't just want to have a decision point presented to me or thrust upon me by the algorithms. I want to know why, and knowing why will create trust, and that's the one of the most critical factors in adoption of AI. Aside from figuring out the right places to use it, is trust, where we as humans have to trust it, and that's a tough sell up front. Is trusting, what many see as the magical black box that just, spits out answers to you and in magical ways. And that does not create trust. What a person wants to know is, how did it arrive at that conclusion? Tell me the why, whether it's predicting something in the future or analyzing something, for the previous week. Tell me the why. And then the second avenue in that train of thought is, yeah, it's a great example. And the increase in critical events is important, no doubt, but having the AI assist in understanding why, and this goes back to those insane number of data points that we're collecting. There's just so many that it is very difficult to see sometimes that pattern, that needle in a haystack, that nonetheless is a gem, stuck right in the middle, that AI can say, this is what I noticed. This is the pattern that I've seen. So AI, again, is about that volume of data that we now need to be productive, to stay competitive with the rest of the world. This is where AI now assists us in upticking that productivity. Finding patterns, it's the heart of the strength of AI.
Yeah, and just following up on that a bit, from a fleet management perspective, if you can better understand how well your business is performing, you can adjust accordingly. So if you can extract more insights from your data, maybe you can start to track, the actual results of a new initiative. Maybe it's something related to safety or compliance, or maybe a driver bonus program to boost retention. Of course, there's a lot of variables. It's hard to tell how well is that really working once you roll something out. So at Tandet, are you thinking about ways to use AI to help get a better sense of how well those types of programs and initiatives are actually working once you roll them out?
Yeah, it's funny. It's actually one of the first tangible benefits that we realized as we embarked on this. We had made some strategic changes, both in internal hiring, new processes, new measurements, new KPIs in the safety side of the business. And as time went on, there was a feeling that maybe we're having some success, maybe we're moving the needle a bit. But to be honest with you, no one was confident enough to say, I know we are, or maybe we've done a whole bunch, but we spun and we're in the same place. So, using especially, visual analysis. So BI dashboards that gave us that visual analysis, again, compounding all of that data that we're collecting from the cab that I mentioned, we were actually able to see the impact of the program. In fact, when that was first being presented, one of the questions that the data analyst said is, did you do something around November of, I think it was a year and a half ago, did you do something, have you made some sort of change? And people are scratching their heads, well, I'm not sure, I don't know if I recall, and the answer was, because I'm seeing a significant shift in the year over year patterns of these particular metrics. And then the light went on, and we realized there was this initiative. It did, in fact, start within 30 days of when this data analysis started to show a change in patterns of a number of measurable events. And you know, I think it was very difficult for us to there was so much data to maintain, and we don't have a reams of data scientists at our disposal to say, hey, data analysts, let's analyze, let's figure this out. We actually need AI to help us coalesce that data, and it told us not only was it working, it was working very well. And that feedback then went right back to the people who were responsible for that. And I'll tell you, it's an amazing feeling to be able to see visually on a dashboard you're having an impact.
Yeah, no, and you just think about the value of the information that might be buried somewhere in your data if you could only see it. And you talk about visualization. I think that's an interesting topic because, of course, even with helping you make sense of all the data and pinpoint the most important insights, there's the question about how you actually consume that information from an AI program. So maybe just take us through the types of reports or visualizations that you use at Tandet to help make decisions about how to run the business.
Sure. Yeah, and I would say this journey is truly at the beginning as we try to sort out what should it look like? How's it most consumable? It's taken some time for us to understand what form that might take. So I would argue it's a work in progress, and maybe it should always be a work in progress. I think there's always better ways for us to see data. But right now it's about persona-driven dashboards, for example, that incorporate key analysis from across, the broad spectrum of our operations. So, viewpoints, if you will, or personas of executive, driver managers, safety and compliance, operations managers, maintenance directors, et cetera, and having customized visual dashboards for them and kind of scope to the types of things that they can action and are responsible for. So, whether they appear in the form of heat maps or scatter charts, like for example, one of the interesting ones we have is where we have critical in-cab events, so hard maneuvers, braking, tilt sway, things like that, layered with hours of service performance, and then layered again with distance or time traveled, for example, depending on how you're measured for what you do. And then, combining that with the ability for the consumer of that report to be able to split that out by, corporate, division, group, individual, and drill through and then get to the minutia. This is, one of the key ways that we can help a person understand the relationship of these data points. And in fact, that particular example is one where this is where AI is going to consume that information all over again and really help us understand when we see one start to vary, how is that likely going to impact the other two? And how, when we see these playing together in a certain way, positive and negative, what does that actually mean as far as tomorrow? Matters, and then there's other things, like visualizations of standing assets, driver utilization, and not just from the perspective of are we utilizing drivers to the most efficient way for the business, but in a way that actually should help, keep a driver happy. You mentioned driver retention. So it's really a double-edged sword. We want to make sure that the volume of work that you're getting is good and of quality. Fuel economy, of course, critical in-cab events, drive time versus distance, I mentioned, hours of service violation, again, presented in some interesting visual ways combined with other data. So you can tell we've got a lot crammed in there and we're still kind of sorting a lot of it out, but I can tell you it's some insights and ways to see it that we have never accomplished before.
It's really exciting, and I think it's in a nutshell. It seems like it's all about getting the right information to the right person, at the right time, so you can really act on it. Just broadening the conversation a little bit. Of course, looking beyond the transportation industry to society as a whole, there's been this enormous amount of hype lately about AI. That's, I think, due in large part to the emergence of some of the generative AI tools we've seen become available to the public, and the fun people are having with it, and also some productivity gains that people are seeing from that. But really, there's all kinds of different forms of AI that are becoming increasingly available. We have the computing power and the data storage capabilities that are making it more accessible for more use cases for developers to work on it and for end users to roll it out and implement it. Corey, you've been working with AI for some time now. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how AI development and implementation has changed, in these, what they call it, the last couple of years.
Hmm.
What are you able to do with AI now that maybe just wasn't feasible a handful of years ago?
Well, I think that's a great question. I've had the good fortune of kind of following this for many years now. I've had fantastic opportunities to work with people both in business and academia as they have gone through this progress of what we're now seeing as modern AI development, and seen their challenges and the amazing progress that they've been making as they've been making it. There's been a huge amount of attention created by LLM and generative AI, and it's certainly put AI front and center. I think to some extent that's hurting the public understanding of what AI and ML can really do. It comes in a lot of different flavors, many different
Yeah.
focuses and intent. And in and of itself, it is fascinating, and it absolutely will have value, I think. But for many businesses, it could end up being a distraction because we think that's what it is. Perhaps crafting my next sales literature for me and writing a beautiful whatever it might be. I think that the value now is, maybe the value is forcing those that are providing what I think is tangible use cases for AI to make their case, to blow through all of that hyperbole and say, hey, we actually have real ways that this can work for you, not stuff that's kind of hard to get your head around. And so I think that's the biggest thing. I think the most practical, the most obvious sign of change now is that I am seeing, almost on a monthly basis, brand new, very practical use cases being brought about by technology vendors that really resonate, that immediately go, now I can see how this can help me. It isn't just this kind of weird, foggy thing that I've been trying to understand for years. Tangible use cases. And I think that's the best thing. I think it was a problem. I think it was a solution for many years looking for a problem, but now I think they're understanding how it can truly be used. And so, the vision is clearing, I would argue.
That's great. And I think, I've seen the same thing covering the technology side of the transportation industry for more than a decade now. It's amazing how far we've come. And AI has shifted from something that seemed very maybe pie in the sky and futuristic to something that's now here and can be even a very simple use case, but a tangible use case where you can really see a way to improve your business that's not theoretical, but it's here and it's tangible. Final question before I let you go, Corey. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the future of AI in the trucking industry. I know that's a little bit of a crystal ball question, and of course, it's important, to understand that AI is already here and fleets can use it today to some extent. But how do you envision the use cases and the capabilities expanding in the years and even decades ahead, if you had to look ahead?
Wow. Okay. So now you're pushing me on my power of prediction, which I've never said is really great, but we'll give it a shot here.
Sure.
I think, we all know that to some degree, this is kind of an easy one for me to say that, AI assisted vehicles. I'm not so sure about the timing of true autonomy. I think it may come in pin to pin highway type applications first when it's out there, but I think that part is still a way off, quite frankly, whether it's the technology or just the legal framework and regulatory framework kind of catching up to what might be necessary to have in place before we do that. But assistance in the cab driven by more and more I think, providing more and more valuable feedback to the driver, absolutely, whether it's intelligent cameras, lidar, just the number of sensors. And the key to AI now is that we now have the sensors available to us, visual, audio, and others that really can help feed AI and enable it to really leverage what it can do so well. And then, grab that data and feed it back to me in a way, to some degree that it's going to be almost like the F-16 cockpits. I think the drivers are really going to have some cool technologies that are helping them, drive safely, drive comfortably. And I still think there's a ton of potential out there. So, I would put that out there. But, I think again, planning, even again back to driver happiness, I think the ability for AI and these more sophisticated algorithms to plan trips, and a lot of what we do is long haul in our business. And I think true long haul driving, whether it's single or teams that we do today, might become a thing of the past, simply because it's harder and harder to find people who are willing to be away long,
Yeah.
those long time, long number of hours or days away in the business. So I think algorithms that help us plan, these multi-driver trips,
Yeah.
allowing each driver as a part of that trip to get home at the end of every day, just like you and I do, will, I think, improve the opportunity to bring people into the business because we still desperately need them and we want them, and they can make a good living at it, and also probably still improve on the utilization of our assets. So I would throw that out there. Maybe one more. It's kind of been a toy with me is that I still think that there is a potential for vehicle to vehicle networks or something of that ilk with the evolution of 5G, and quite frankly 6G probably not that far behind it. I think that, we look at a lot of this AI assisted technology in the cab or the quest to get to, some autonomous decision making in the part of the vehicle. One of the things that is very important is latency, the ability to get and process information very, very quickly.
Mhm.
And I think 360-degree awareness algorithms that can assist the driver really benefit from sub 1 millisecond response times on their inputs and outputs. And I think, with vehicles sharing data with other vehicles, like I'm encountering this weather or sudden temperature shift ahead of me or traffic condition that changes, on the spot, and other vehicles can learn from that in nearby very real time or near real time types of latencies, whether it may include signs, light standards, and so forth. I think that type of network will may be the solution to really driving 360-degree awareness with AI in the cab. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, no, it does feel like there's a lot of untapped potential there, vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure communications that has been talked about a lot
Hmm.
and just hasn't happened. But perhaps that's something that can be unlocked in the future over time. And that is a lot of fun to think about. But Corey, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I see we're running a bit long on time, but thank you for sticking with us here a little bit extra. And I really appreciate you joining us. And thank you again for sharing your insights with us.
It was a pleasure. Thanks again, Seth. I appreciate it.
Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our original question. How can AI empower data-driven fleet management? As we've heard during this episode, AI can help transportation companies uncover hidden trends and extract actionable insights from the massive amount of data they are collecting. In the years ahead, this next wave of AI capabilities promises to make fleet management more intelligent and more proactive than ever before. If you've enjoyed this episode of Road Signs, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, let us know how we did by texting TT Survey to 571-622-0001. And of course, we'll be back soon with a fresh episode of Road Signs. Until then, I'm Seth Clevenger. Thank you for listening.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.